You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Somber day for Rams fans. This is our Rams talk of the show. Tough loss at SoFi on Sunday. Final score 31-14. It was a close game for much of the game and then got out of hand there at the end. This is the LA Football Show. We're going to get all into it. Joined, as always, by the madman Jamal Madney. Outside of the game, Jamal, what's happening? Happy Monday. How you doing?
Doing well, Ryan, outside of the game. You know, it was a good weekend and excited to start the new week and hopefully start fresh after we recycle the conversation here with the Rams and we can look forward to new things. And the bright side being that we may be playing a team this Sunday that's even worse in a situation than we are. And at least a starting quarterback that is still happily married and not dealing with other things off the field. So, you know, there's still a silver lining to find, but you got to really look for it this week. But there's a silver lining there. So excited to talk more about the game. But it's just one of those weeks where you have to really focus on the positives.
Yeah. Make sure to like and subscribe to the LA Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you listen, we are. Just search Believe in LA Football or LA Football Show. You'll find us. We're on YouTube at LAFB Network or LAFB Rams, our new team-centric YouTube channel. And obviously the website where you can find everything you need, including digital content, social, and all of our shows, LAFBnetwork.com. So before we get into it, this episode of the LA Football Show brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today on your mobile device or desktop. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You're going to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Still got over half the season, or just, about half the season left of the NFL to really get in the game, start building up your account, winning some money, hopefully win some stuff for the Super Bowl. Hopefully these Rams can get stuff turned around and you can win some money off them. I don't know if I'd be betting on them right now, if I'm being honest. But hey, yeah, you got some good college games to bet on too. So betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So how do we want to tackle this first, Jamal? I'll start with this. Let's start with a little positive. I thought beginning of the game, the Rams looked like they got some things right. We didn't necessarily dive too much into previewing. I know I did a preview show on a 49ers channel with my buddy, and we previewed the game, but I knew that the Niners would probably score on their first drive because Kyle Shanahan is known for just those first 15 to 20 plays script is one of the best in the business. Like when he has it scripted out, the offense just hums, and especially against the Rams, they seem to always do. So I knew the first drive was probably going to be a score, but the Rams, I thought, countered well after that. They ended up taking a 14-10 lead. Defensively looked a little better, cleaned things up. The offensive line looked the best we've seen in quite some time in the beginning of the game. And then obviously it all came crashing down later on. But to start with a positive, what were your thoughts in the beginning of the game? Because I thought overall it looked like, okay, this is going to be one of the better Rams-Niners games in the regular season we've seen in a long time because of everything I just said.
Ryan, I completely agree. And I actually mentioned on Twitter at halftime, I said, win or lose, this is the best the Rams have actually looked all season in terms of that first half of football. What was interesting is that they only had the ball 3 times in the first half and had 2 long drives. I thought McVay understood the personnel he was going up against and the personnel that he had, really exercised the screen game with variety very well. Also got Ronnie Rivers involved, an X factor there with a number of different carries and catching the ball out of the backfield. Powell kind of did his thing as well. And so there was a lot of variety and a mixture of things, and then played off of that screen game with deeper play action to Kupp, to Ben Skowronek. And so I loved the mix of what was happening. I thought the offensive line held up quite well, courtesy of that play calling. We're not behind the chains, behind the sticks at all. And when you went into the midway through the second quarter and it was a 14-7 ball game, and you looked up and said, well, the only touchdown that the Niners have is a courtesy of a Christian McCaffrey throw, and then had an opportunity to have a really nice defensive stand inside the red zone to make that 14-10, felt really good going into the locker room. with that whole situation. The problem, Ryan, was after halftime is when the disaster really began. But that first 20, 25 minutes of the game was very encouraging. And that's what's so bizarre about this game. Even win or lose, I was on the cusp of saying, hey, this team now after the bye looks like they're turning the page. They're just playing a team that has their number in the regular season, but they are doing the right things. The behaviors are starting to come into play. McVay schematically is getting the mojo back after 2 weeks in the lab. And then to follow it up with such a lemon of a second half to not only undo the positive of what the momentum that was generated in the first half, but now to feel even worse about this team post-bye that we were feeling pre-bye. That's what's so disappointing for me, is that emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a disappointing second half after everything we just talked about, the positives in the first, and usually you like to see them build upon that. And I think McVay teams typically have, and to come out with just a dud really on both sides of the ball. And, one thing we got to mention, and we got to give credit where credit's due, is, hats off to Kyle Shanahan and their offensive, coaching staff for how they use Christian McCaffrey. I mean, the Rams saw Christian McCaffrey just 2 weeks ago in Carolina. He was their entire offense, but it still didn't mean much just because they weren't able to do anything else. And even the yards that he was able to get with Carolina weren't necessarily meaningful yards when it came to the scoreboard. And now you have him 2 weeks in San Francisco, and, they used him to the best way that you can use a player like Christian McCaffrey. And it's scary to think about when Deebo Samuel's back, what they can do with those two players, with how versatile they are, how talented they are. And what do you call that? 21 personnel, 11, like it's just, they can play so diversively in that scheme. And the Rams just had no stop for it. I mean, a passing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and he probably could have gotten even more. He also had 2 fumbles that they both got back, and that's where the Rams had to capitalize on those. They could have really stopped the bleeding on some of those. So it was a combination of A, not being able to stop Christian McCaffrey, but B, the few times they did, not being able to capitalize and having those opportunistic situations that could have really swung the game. And that was really the tail of the tape. I mean, it wasn't like Jimmy Garoppolo did anything out of the ordinary, fantastic. It wasn't like George Kittle. I know he had a touchdown, but it wasn't like he was burning them on everything. It was a combination of Christian McCaffrey just totally taking over the game, schematically calling a really good game from Kyle Shanahan. And then on the offensive side for the Rams, yet again, could get nothing going in the rushing game in the second half. And they just could not get in a rhythm in the passing game, even with a little bit better offensive line play, which obviously didn't look as good in the second half as it did in the first. But the rhythm just was not there yet again, which has been the storyline for this offense all season long. And, the trade deadline approaches tomorrow, which we're going to get into here in a minute, but I don't even know what they can do to really fix that at this point, Jamal. And it's become a broken record. So I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on it. We'll look more maybe at what the trade deadline can do to pose it. But yeah, it was just the same old story on offense in the second half.
Yeah, Ryan, I think you said it best. The first thing I want to really emphasize is that there were opportunities for the Rams. You mentioned the 2 fumbles. There was that huge interception opportunity at the beginning of the third quarter that could have swung the game as well. And that's the reality of the 2022 Rams. The margin for error with this team is much more narrow than it was last year. And so there are 3 or 4 plays in every football game that can really swing things. And if you can't capitalize on those, chances are the Rams aren't going to win the game. And that just wasn't the case last year. And that's sort of the reality of the world we're living in, given where this offense is in terms of how difficult it is to move the ball. Conversely, I thought Kyle Shanahan, you mentioned the rushing touchdown, receiving touchdown, throwing touchdown. Christian McCaffrey, first player since 2005 to be able to do all of those things. I think the last player may have very well been Cordell Stewart, a.k.a. Slash from the Pittsburgh Steelers, to be able to do that. And what I loved about what Shanahan did with McCaffrey is out of the passing game, really set him up for success in space, getting him matched up on linebackers, getting him with an opportunity to do one cut and go. And even in the run game, had him in shotgun, Ryan, but it was essentially, I've got McCaffrey to the right side of Garoppolo, and we're just going to run off the right side of the line with the zone concept. Or if I have him on the left side of Garoppolo, it's going to be left side of the line with one zone read and go. And so he really minimized McCaffrey's need to dance around the line of scrimmage to sort of find those holes, really made it very intentional, and then played off of that with that beautiful backward pass that looked like a screen pass, and he just dropped it in there looking like one of his brothers as a quarterback. And McCaffrey's just a special guy. Stanford may have lost to UCLA on Saturday, but Stanford definitely won against the Rams on Sunday. But, to follow up, Ryan, the other positive I'd like to highlight was Leonard Floyd did an absolutely outstanding job. His first 2 sacks.
He showed up.
That was another really positive. He showed up, and overall, I thought they played really well. But again, it becomes one of these situations where the defense looked a little worn out and spent in the second half when they knew their offense couldn't consistently get the ball moving. And again, it comes back to this lack of dedication to the running game, Ryan. Again, 21 carries, 56 yards, started early with Ronnie Rivers, and then it felt like they just completely abandoned it. And as a result, it became very obvious. Cooper Kupp, again, leading the team in receiving. What else is new? Allen Robinson had a decent game with over 50 yards, and then nobody else had more than 20 yards receiving in this game. And so after the first 2 drives, it just felt very stagnant, very stale, and the Rams just couldn't keep up that variety. And in a funny way, McVay sort of played the game the way Shanahan has been criticized over the years. When McVay had the opportunity to script things early, the Rams looked really good. But over the course of the game, the offense just got worse over time. And I think to the final point I'll say here, Ryan, is when you talk about what do you do in the trade deadline, I think you have to try and go get a running back, but the price can't be that high. And this is the situation right now. Obviously, Les Snead has played the George Steinbrenner, Jerry Buss type of game very well, where I am going to mortgage the future to have a window opportunity right now. And so for me, can they get a running back, a diamond in the rough off the cheap? Because I look at this team, Ryan, as having a 1.5-year window. I think it's this year, and I think it's next year when you think about Stafford, Kupp's durability, Donald's durability, just everything around this team, what they're capable of. I think it's this year, and I think it's next year before the full-on rebuild takes place. So if I'm Les Snead, I'm saying I'm only going to give up draft capital if I believe with 100% conviction that the guy I get in is going to put me over the top and get me right back in the Super Bowl hunt for this year and next year. And if that guy is not there, there is no point burning draft capital when I can get somebody in free agency, because the Rams are going to be in a full-on rebuild mode from 2024 onwards, in my opinion. I think there's an 18-month window here with McVay, with Stafford, with Kupp, with Donald, with this core. And I think that's the thinking Snead is going to have here in this next 30 hours or so from now until the trade deadline.
Well, and the other side of that, and it's just adding to it, is, the big jokes and memes and stuff in the NFL is all about, Tom Brady divorcing Giselle to be on a losing team. But Sean McVay and Aaron Donald both flirted with retiring, and I don't think they came back to miss the playoffs or be on this team. And it wouldn't shock me if they didn't make any moves. I'm not saying I don't believe this will happen, but it wouldn't shock me if they make no moves and somehow this team misses the playoffs. They maybe McVay and Donald will say, all right, let's just retire now. Like, we're good. Like, we didn't come back to be in a rebuild. And so it's almost to ensure that your 2-star guys, your coach and your defensive standout Hall of Famer, stay for the duration of their contract. You have to almost make a move at this deadline to ensure that this team can improve in certain areas, which this roster just doesn't have the talent to do without making a move. And we put it up here on the screen. I know everyone will probably say yes. Should the Rams make a move at the deadline? Text RamsHouse to 31032. Let us know not only if they should, but who for. And some guys now we can kind of get into a little bit, Jamal, because I think they absolutely need to. And I know the draft capital is not a ton, but they were in on McCaffrey. There was an offer of 4 different picks to get him. They just missed out. Let's start with running back, because
on that point, let me just interject there. McCaffrey's a guy who can change the whole complexion of your season, your identity, and your expectations. Yep. If Christian McCaffrey went on the Rams, I don't care what the record is, you give Sean McVay 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks with the Christian McCaffrey and a Cooper Kupp on the field together, that team is going to make a deep run in the NFC, and we feel like we're right back in the mix to defend that title. So to me, the question is, who is that guy that can actually do it? I don't think there's a point in burning more draft capital for just a sort of a serviceable guy that's just a slight upgrade over what the Rams have. It has to be that guy that brings everyone over the top. And to your point about where the power dynamic lies, I think that McVay, I think it also shows how close McVay and Donald were to retirement in the offseason, because McVay looks like he's retired right now, Ryan. I mean, this is 80% of the team is back. They lost a number of key starters, but McVay just looks like he's, one of these great Nobel Prize winning authors that just is in writer's block. It just, the variety and some of the obvious things that he should be playing and tinkering with, it's just not there. And I don't know if his heart isn't in it or he's a little burnt out or what, but McVay's got to get back to who we know Sean McVay is. Donald, of course, is Donald, but we can start seeing it, Ryan. Cooper Kupp's body is going to break down over the next, beyond 18 months. This usage rate is just not sustainable. Stafford, you could argue, maybe is past his prime already, and that decline is going to begin. So there's an 18-month window here. And for me, it's, if there's another Christian McCaffrey, let's roll the dice. Let's go all in. But to go, give up all this draft capital for a Kareem Hunt, I don't know if I would do that.
Okay, let's double click on that, because I can pull up a list, but I think we all are in agreement. Obviously, offensive line is a need, but no teams are trading key offensive linemen. That's just not what happens. Even if you're in rebuild, those are the guys you hang on to. You hang on to your young quarterback and you hang on to offensive linemen. So I think we would all agree the two positions that this team is looking at is running back and pass rusher. And I know there's always the names. We'll get to pass rush in a minute, but let's start with running back. Is there a guy, Jamal, out there that you think that not only could be had, but would be worth having? It's crazy to me, and this is what's so interesting about the running back position in general, is a guy like Darrell Henderson, who McVay has said many times he loves Darrell, he's a part of this offense, and yet he can't get on the field in front of an undrafted free agent out of Fresno State and Ronnie Rivers. And Ronnie Rivers out-carries him now 2 weeks in a row. And so clearly there's either a disconnect, that the talent discrepancy of Darrell Henderson, that they don't believe he can really carry the load, or it's what we've seen through his whole career, that they just don't think he can stay healthy. But obviously they're either rolling the dice with Ronnie Rivers the rest of the season as their RB1, or they have to go get someone. Is there a guy out there that Melvin Gordon? I agree with you. I don't think you trade unless Kareem Hunt can be had for like a 7th round pick. I don't think that moves the needle whatsoever, because running back is such a plug and play position, except for if you have a superstar. Maybe a guy like Ezekiel Elliott. We just saw Tony Pollard go off for the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe the Rams can go get Ezekiel Elliott for some big draft picks, but they'll obviously have to have the negotiation on who takes what of the contract, because he's getting paid a lot for running back. And I'm not saying I want that, but maybe that's a guy out there. Is there a running back you think on just the top of mind that is even worth going after?
Ryan, I think of the Rams a lot of as, those Steinbrenner Yankee teams in the trade deadline, where I think I'm looking at a guy as a rental for the next 9 games. And I actually love the idea of not having to give up too much draft capital, but maybe taking on a little bit of salary for Zeke Elliott to just see what he has in the tank over the next 9 games. And because there's such a risk reward situation there where the upside could be so significant and the downside is what? What is the downside? There is no downside. I mean, okay, you're deeper in the tax. That you've played that game with the Ramsey move and the Stafford move, and that's an overall philosophy. Kroenke's not going to cry over $10 million, in terms of added tax. That's like $7 for Stan Kroenke. So, the downside is so little here, Ryan. It's staggering to me that Darrell Henderson leads this team in rushing and has 197 yards over 7 games. Darrell Henderson is averaging less than 30 yards rushing a game and leads this team in rushing. And yet he still can't get on the field. There's obviously a disconnect with Cam Akers. So there's some dysfunction that's going on in this running back room. I think you're absolutely right. It's either running back or pass rusher. And why not, give up a 7th round pick for a guy that potentially can be a game changer? Because you have to be looking at ceiling right now, Ryan. It's not about productivity. Is this guy capable of changing the course of my season's trajectory? And Zeke Elliott has shown it in the past. He's banged up, a lot of tread on the tires. He's probably never going to be the player that he once was. But if you give him a 9-10 month window, a la what we gave OBJ last year, who knows what can happen? And so I love these sort of risk reward type of moves where for one pick, we could maybe get a guy at an all-pro level for 8 or 9 weeks.
Yeah. And the other one I'll throw out there that I've tweeted about before, but I think you really need to consider Melvin Gordon. And I know Rams fans don't want to hear that because of the fumble issues, but at this point in the season, you got to take risks, right? There has to be risks. And when Gordon holds onto the football, he's actually still a very talented running back. In Denver, even with Javonte Williams, I know he's hurt right now, but even when they were splitting the backfield, take out the fumbles, Melvin Gordon was actually the more efficient running back when it came to yards per play, yards per carry, touchdown efficiency. Melvin Gordon was the more efficient running back. And to me, he's lost favor in Denver. I mean, they signed Latavius Murray off the streets, and Murray's the lead back over there. Even yesterday in London, he was the lead back. I know they both had a touchdown, but Murray played the entire second half primarily. And to me, this is a trade where you could probably just go straight up Cam Akers for Melvin Gordon. Cam Akers is not going to be a Ram, either whether he's just benched the rest of the season or whether he's cut. He's not going to play another down most likely for this team. I don't think that can be tethered and rebuilt. So if you can just get a guy like Melvin Gordon that, yes, has some fumbling history, but is a very talented back, that could end up being the best of both cases for both teams. Cam Akers gets a new fresh start in Denver. Melvin Gordon comes back to Los Angeles, where he was with the Chargers for a little bit, and gets a fresh start here as potentially the true lead back in LA. So there's a lot of risk with that move. Absolutely. I'm not denying that. But at this point, you have to take risks. And they're not going to be getting a guy like CMC, and they could potentially have a guy like Melvin Gordon for a straight up player swap, or maybe they take on or add a draft pick in there to take on the salary, whatever it may be. But to me, that's the one that makes the most sense. And I think he makes more sense than Kareem Hunt in terms of upside. No,
I completely agree, Ryan. I think that's a great one. And maybe we can sort of, super glue his hands or something and, find a way to deal with the fumbling. But no, again, you have to look at upside. And so what is the best version of Melvin Gordon? What is the best version of a Zeke Elliott? You have to be thinking in those terms, because a middle of the road running back isn't going to get you where you want to go. Look, if the Rams finish 8-9 or 6-11, that doesn't matter. The Rams aren't playing for a record. They're playing for contention to legitimately defend their title. I'll give you one more, Ryan, and this one's a little bit more far-fetched, and it may not happen if the trade deadline was maybe a week later. This could be very feasible, and that's Lenny Fournette. Because I think that the Bucs and the Rams are in a very similar situation right now. And Sunday's game, and I know we'll spending a lot of time on that later in the week, but Sunday's game feels like an elimination game where the loser of that game is going to basically be focused on rebuilding moving forward. As bad as the NFC is, it's going to be far-fetched to see the Rams at 3-5 jump the Niners, having lost both games, be 2 losses behind the Seahawks, who are playing good football. That's going to be a tall ask. And if the Bucs fall to 3-6, it's basically all over. And so how do the Bucs think about their ability to contend? Is there a package to get a Lenny Fournette where the asking price isn't too high? He's another guy who can completely change the trajectory of your offensive identity for a season. If the trade deadline was the following Tuesday, I think this would be a lot more kind of feasible conversationally. It's probably far-fetched, but that's another guy that can really sort of change the course of your season. That's worth at least giving a call and seeing, because Tampa may very well be in seller's mode at this point. You don't know what's going on inside that locker room either.
Yeah, the last 2 options I'll give, and then let's talk a little bit pass rush, and then we can wrap this thing up. And it's much more difficult trading for rookie or first year backs, just because obviously that's the way the NFL is now. You recycle with young backs, but a guy that they could potentially go for because of the depth on the team is former Trojan Keontae Ingram, and out in Arizona. Now this is probably not likely because it's in division, and very rarely is someone going to trade someone in division, but that thought process of maybe a Keontae Ingram-like player who's that 5th, 6th, 7th round pick of this year or last year, but can't get on the field, but potentially could come in. And again, we just talked about going after a guy that moves the needle. I know that doesn't necessarily move the needle, but we could get that for basically nothing and could come in with a lot of talent, a lot of tread, and take over this backfield. The other one I'll mention, and this is one they could probably end up getting for free, Ronald Jones, another former Trojan, has come out. Rojo wants out of KC, who he can't get on the field, can't even be an active starter, and a guy that they could potentially go after. So I think if they don't go after the big name, high upside, the Zeke, the Melvin Gordon, then they could maybe look at some of these younger players that can't get on the field they can get for arguably nothing to at least add some bodies to the backfield and see if one breaks out.
Ryan, I love that. I think those are both really smart, and those guys kind of being familiar with the LA markets and really good players when they're at their best. Last one, I'll give you far-fetched. What if there was an LA trade where it helps both teams, where there's a Josh Kelly for the Tutu Atwell, where, you know, the Chargers are dying for a receiver right now, and the Rams need a running back. So maybe there's a win-win scenario there. I know the Chargers fans are, you know, biting their nails right now with the trade deadline, and we got to get a receiver. We can't wait until Mike Williams gets healthy. It's going to be too late. We'll be 4-6, et cetera. And the Rams need to win right now to see what they really have. Is there a running back for a receiver spot there? Tutu Atwell has 1 catch on the season. He's clearly not being utilized with the Rams. You give that toy to a Brandon Staley and an arm like Justin Herbert as a real credible deep threat. You bring in a Josh Kelly, could be a win-win for LA.
I like that a lot. I know the Chargers are finally kind of falling in love with Josh Kelly, but I think that would be a fun one, and we get to keep Josh here in LA. So, you know, the other thing to mention, obviously, before I move on to pass rushers, is Kyren Williams hopefully should be back here. He's in that 21-day window to be activated. And so if we don't see a trade for running back, that's got to be the thought process, is he's going to be our lead guy when healthy. But obviously you can't bank on that if he hasn't been healthy yet. So I would like to see them do a move, but I also really do want to see Kyren Williams, and given a fair shot, what he can do in this offense. So pass rushers, Jamal, we don't have to spend a ton of time on it. Obviously, Brian Burns, the big fish everyone's talking about. It's going to take a lot to get him. So you're looking at the Rams having basically no draft picks for the foreseeable future if they go after him. But again, if this is the window, 18 months or so, then that's worth it, I guess, in this scenario. The other one I know that's been mentioned is Bradley Chubb. I think after the Broncos win going into the bye, he's come out publicly saying he wants to be a Bronco for life. I don't see that as a happen. But obviously they have a relationship there. We talked about a Melvin Gordon potential trade. So obviously George Payton and Les Snead have done stuff in the past, most notably Von Miller last year. So do you see any pass rushers outside of those two, or do you want to just double click on those two as potential guys for this team to go after?
Yeah, Ryan, I want to double click on Burns, because that's the one where that's all in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's it going to take to get Burns? What? 2 1s, a 2, and a 4, something like that. I mean, roughly, you know, or a 1, 2 2s and a 4, you know, something in that vicinity to go get a Burns. You know, it's a pretty hefty price, where you're talking about this team is going to be on the other side of 2024 is going to be a pretty bad team for about a 3-year period. But do you believe that Burns is that missing piece? Look, I think the big thing that's missing from this defense also, they've been a serviceable defense, but they're not dynamic. And that Von Miller, Aaron Donald combination is what propelled this team over the top. And it changed how offense is thought schematically, in terms of what they did, in terms of ball control, in terms of situational football, that then in turn gave the offense more confidence, more opportunities, better field to work with in terms of shorter fields. And so if you think it's all of those elements and they can just get right back to where they are, then that's the ultimate Les Snead, Jerry Buss, George Steinbrenner move. And I think that's the highest risk, highest reward situation. I think it's a little steep. I think the Rams issues go a little bit beyond that. I think replacing a lot more talent and just the overall level of talent on this team. Ryan, I said it from week one. I just don't think this team's that talented. So I don't know if one guy, especially defensively in today's NFL, can drastically change your entire trajectory. So I'd probably not do it, but it wouldn't surprise me if Les Snead was making those phone calls to see what that asking price is.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously they were in talks with Christian McCaffrey. So the lines have been open between both GMs and teams for over a week now. So wouldn't shock me. I still personally just think the bigger issue with this team is offense. So that's what I would be targeting, whether it's another receiver. I know there's still the open door about OBJ, but that's still a month away from him returning. Whether it's running back like we talked about
the OBJ, and we keep talking about it from our perspective, right? And sometimes there's a dating perspective you have to take, is like, I'm X, Y, and Z, and so the other person's really going to like me, but you have to look at it from both persons' point of view. OBJ now has been out for just about a year. OBJ is not going to come back to a 3-4, 3-5 Rams team if he's only going to play 3 or 4 games. OBJ is going to come back to play those primetime games in the playoffs in January and be that piece over the top. OBJ's looking at the Chiefs. OBJ's looking at the Bills. OBJ's looking at these teams where he can be that piece to put them over the top and really enhance his legacy. So as much as we want OBJ, that's getting more and more to be just a fantasy and a pipe dream, because I don't think it doesn't make any sense right now. If we're being very honest, it makes no sense for him to want to come to the Rams.
Yeah, exactly. I know he loves the Rams, loves the team, loves the city, but yeah, he's not going to sign a 1-year half deal basically to not even make the playoffs. So we'll see. Trade deadline is, like we said, about 20 or less than 24 hours away. Text RamsHouse to 31032. Let us know who you would go after, who you want to see, what position you want to see, and let us know all that, because it's going to be an interesting turn of the night if the Rams don't make a move, which obviously we've come very accustomed to them doing. So that would definitely be a change, a heel turn, if you will, of Les Snead if they don't do anything. And one that I think won't obviously benefit them because they kind of need to at this point. But we shall see. We got a big game in Tampa, tough loss. A lot of questions that still need answers. We try to get into a lot of it, but we'll have plenty more throughout the week. LAFBnetwork.com. We have, articles going up, our recaps up there with some analysis. Ryan Anderson is doing stuff. We do have a new show debuting most likely tonight, our tailgate takeover show with Brittany Betts. We were at SoFi yesterday. I was down there as well in the tailgate, in the pink lot, hanging out with all you fans, filming some fun stuff, some charades, some trivia, some fan engagement. So that's going to be a new show every week that we're going to do at different LA football games. So make sure to check that out at LAFBnetwork.com and the LAFB Network YouTube. But Jamal, anything else you need to add or get off your chest before wrapping this Rams segment up?
No, Ryan, it's been a slog so far this season. It's been tough. We haven't really seen the Rams put a full game together. It just feels like they haven't quite yet arrived in the 2022 season. I think it's going to be a really critical next 24 hours to see where management's head is at in terms of, are they really going to be all in this year, or are they going to make peace with the roster that they have? And again, like I said, I'm really excited for this week because I think that Sunday game, that's an elimination game for either the Rams or the Bucs. The loser of that game, I think, starts thinking about rebuilding and playing younger guys and so forth. So I think this is the critical week of the whole season where this is the inflection point where we decide and find out whether the Rams are going to truly make a title defense credibly, or this is going to be an off year and we start thinking about 2023. So urgency to the max, drama to the max. What more could you want? This is an LA sports team. We wouldn't want it any other way. So I'm very fired up about these next few days.
Absolutely. And last thing we'll say before signing off, just announced while we were recording, Sean McVay said that no structural damage to Cooper Kupp's ankle, soft tissue. He does expect him to play on Sunday, so may not even miss a game, which is obviously, if he's not playing, the Rams aren't winning that game most likely. So extremely important there, but that is some very good news, some much needed good news surrounding these Rams. And let's see what happens in the next 24 hours. So for Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dart. This is the LA Football Show, Rams House segment. We'll talk to you guys all later in the week. Have a good one. Peace.